All right, guys, what is up? Welcome to the Transparency Friday, Idaho4. Good afternoon. All right, real quick, I'm going to be doing 2 lives today. This is the first of 2. The next one will be right about the 9:30 Eastern Standard Time frame. So if you're on the West Coast, that's 6:30 for you guys. It is approximately almost 2:30 Eastern Standard Time Zone. A lot of things popping off. First, Idaho4, Judge Hippler has been trickling in his opinions and his orders. And one thing I just want to point out really quick, I'm going to refer to everybody. This is Rob Hill's FBI report from May 1st, 2023. Now, the reason I want to point to this first is because I want to make sure everybody understands this. This report is the one that has all of the timestamps. Okay. First of all, it says these are the videos that we looked at. All right. If they were accurate, if they weren't accurate. And then he goes through and he is listing off what was happening at these different timestamps. Now, it is imperative to understand, I went back through so that I can make sure that this is not mistaken. The only movements on this report are vehicles that look like the suspect vehicle. With that said, when we are considering them looking at just, let's say, the camera from 1112, which is right next to the house, right? None of these are, for example, the DoorDash driver, okay? This is the same exact thing that they did in the Dan Moore case. And this is how I blew it up in the Dan Moore case. I was able to show that they left out one of the biggest bombshells in the Dan Moore case and the Idaho case, which was the white truck arrives after one of the witnesses leaves, which is like, well, how could you see the white truck if you left before it arrived? And so the reason that was bombshell-ish in a very important way is because that means that you didn't leave in the vehicle that you said you left in, okay? Because you couldn't have seen a white truck come there and be there if you had already left a minute and 30 seconds before the white truck ever arrived. So I went back through this to make sure that everybody can understand this is super, like this is really, really important. And that's right here. The following is intended to be a summary of the collected surveillance footage. So this is the purpose of the report, highlighting pertinent sightings which appear to show vehicles matching the description of vehicle 1. This is not all the vehicles that would be coming and going. So this is not the master timeline. This is not the master sheet. For example, I'm going to direct us to some language that I think is interesting. And in order to do that, you would turn to page 2 of the report. Okay. And when we look at page 2 of the report, right here at the highlighted section. Okay. Thank you. It says, the following is intended as a summary of the collected surveillance footage and is not intended to be an all-encompassing report on the entirety of the collected videos. This is how they get away with their wording. Now, understand, this is Hill's report, and Hill was only listed as an expert for the state for rebuttal purposes. Rebuttal purposes. Rebuttal means that based on the defendant's experts, which clearly Ann Taylor has an expert, right? And it's going to testify to, here's your spoiler alert, it's going to testify to the fact that the vehicles that you have identified cannot be an Elantra. That's what's coming based on me reading the documents. So here, Hill is actually going to be a rebuttal to Ann Taylor's expert, which is super interesting because this report should have been offered up because it was used in a sense for the grand jury. Okay, this information was used, but here, and we're going to get into these reports, or not the reports, but we're going to get into the rulings, and you're going to see Hippler announces that, like, hey, Hill is actually just a rebuttal to actually somebody that Ann Taylor has. Now, the reason I wanted to point this out is because hold on. Sorry about that. First of all, with surveillance footage, when you're talking about a close proximity area of just like a mile radius versus we have that mile radius, and then we're going to expand saying that a car came from 10 miles away, right? And so we're encompassing then local Moscow cameras and whatever their timestamps are, and if they're accurate, to then timestamps of WSU. These are really, really important for the accuracy of, are these cameras, what time are they reflecting? How did you figure out if they were accurate? Like what methodology did you use to figure out if the timestamp is accurate? And let's say the timestamp isn't accurate, but how then did you decide what timestamp to go with? Let's say that you can say that one of the cameras is off by a minute, okay, based on how close they are. There's no way that it takes a minute to get from this one camera to this one camera, okay? So therefore, we know that something's off, right? But more importantly, how are you determining that the time stamp is the timestamp that you're going with? And I want to show you guys something I thought was interesting. Look at this language, right here. So the Indian Hill, the 787 address, camera time accurate to local time. See that? Then have you ever seen language like this? Camera time for the 1311. It says camera time approximately 1 minute and 43 seconds behind local time. Okay. They're going to have to explain how and why they got to that. All right. Then the Linda Lane, approximately 5 seconds behind local time. Now, we come over here in Clarkston. Well, first of all, the Bishop. Camera time approximately 7 seconds behind local time. Stadium Way, accurate to local time. Accurate to local time, accurate. 820 Port Drive, Clarkston. Camera time approximately 1 minute behind local time. 400 Bridge Street. Camera time, accurate to local time within 1 minute. Within 1 minute. Notice how all the other ones were saying behind or like before. This one, interesting. Camera time accurate to local time within 1 minute. That is not like 1 minute behind local time, within 1 minute. Very, very interesting with those. Anyways, the following is intended as a summary of the collected surveillance footage and is not intended to be an all-encompassing report on the entirety of the collected video. Okay. First thing I noticed, when Hill's report starts, this is really important. Why? And I made a note of it. I'm asking because I don't know the answer to it, but it's definitely a question that needs to be asked. It starts at 3:26 a.m. Why aren't they starting at the 2:47 or the 2:52 a.m. sighting on WSU's campus? Question number one for me. Why aren't they? Okay. Why aren't they? Think about it. You have a sighting in your PCA. .242, 252, 253, 247. You say you have this car on camera. Why isn't it there? Right? Interesting. Something that I think is interesting is, because we're going to jump right into the ruling here. For a visual representation of the sightings listed below, maps have been provided as reference documents. Okay? Reference documents. Nowhere in this report, and I've said it so many times, but I was like, you know what? Let me just go back and just make sure. Nowhere in this report does Investigator Hill or any investigator in this report that's contributing to this report, do they say about the path of travel? These are simply sightings. What Hippler confuses these maps with, he is confusing these maps. These are just reference points, okay? These are not paths of travel, okay? This is just to show on Google Maps, because you have to put in one address to the other address. This is upside down, hold on. And so Google Maps just has this, that's just what Google Maps does, okay? In order to show the distance between something, you type in the points of reference. So, and it's to show, hey, this is where the house is, okay? This is where this camera is. Same thing, and it's where all these different cameras were, where Ridge is, where Linda Lane is. The car never takes any path of travel. They never have the car going over to Linda Lane and over by the dumpster. These are simply to show where these cameras are and the close proximity. What Hippler does in his order is unbelievable, because these are not paths of travel. He takes them, though, as paths of travel. This is just to simply show how close in proximity these cameras are to the crime scene. Period. Period. And you know how I know that? Because I read the report. I read the report, and it says it right here. That for map 1, that's going to refer you to the addresses over there in Indian Hills. For the remainder of the addresses in Moscow, Idaho, please refer to map 2. Digital copies of map 1 and map 2 will be attached to the 1A section of the case. Okay. Now, I think it's interesting then, the last thing I'll say is, if this is supposed to be just of the, these are just points of reference with that vehicle, or any vehicle for that matter, that would look like the suspect vehicle 1, okay? What I think is interesting, though, is that they are talking about headlights, okay? The most specific reference would be the headlights at when the vehicle leaves at 3:58 out of King Road, right here. When a vehicle leaves and everyone's saying this is the vehicle, it's leaving at 3:58. So a vehicle matching the description of vehicle 1 travels west on Queen Road and turns north onto King Road. Headlights can be seen shining on the trees. Okay, all that. then it makes its loop up and around. Okay. Now, when it's going to, right here, it leaves headlights are seen traveling south on Walenta. South is getting out of that area. All right. For it to then say headlights are seen traveling north on Walenta, for this man to talk and say anything that this would be matching headlights, the suspect vehicle, I cannot wait to hear about this one. Okay. Because that would be 100% an assumption. You want to know why? Because this vehicle at this point in time, it never within 20 or 30 seconds pulls into King to be then seen on 1112. They're stating that it does this because it's then going to be the vehicle that's going over there to be on Ridge. Okay. So this right here, how you can say that this specific reference point is that you were just jotting down ones that that went with the suspect vehicle 1. You can't see what car it is at all. So this is where Hill's going to get blown up. Hill's going to, mark my words right here, at 4 o'clock and 14 seconds in this trial, Hill is going to get blown up for this. Like blown. Mark my words. Clip this time in right here. What is today's date? April 25th at 2:39 p.m. Lana said, in this trial, wait till we get to the 4 hour and 14 timestamp of when Hill has to talk about this and how he's even mentioning this because this is from a vehicle that they have no idea what vehicle truly this is. Okay. Now, with that said, we're going to Hippler's response of this. Order on defendant's motion limiting make and model of suspect vehicle. Okay, this is the one that I wanted to know. I was like, I want to hear how this plays out. I want to hear how Hippler sees this. Okay, this is where I was like, all Ann Taylor is saying here, she's not talking about path of travel. I don't have any reports they're talking about path of travel. We have Immel, who's an expert, and come to find out, Hill, who works for the FBI, was not disclosed as an expert, but he was disclosed as a rebuttal to one of Ann Taylor's experts. So just keep that in mind. Now, in the early morning hours of November 13, 2022, surveillance videos from various locations near the crime scene picked up footage of what law enforcement believed to be the same vehicle as suspect vehicle 1. Defendant seeks an order precluding the state from referring in the vehicles depicted on the various surveillance videos as the same vehicle, suspect vehicle 1, and from asserting that suspect vehicle 1 is a 2014-2016 Hyundai Elantra. The defendant argues that these are speculative conclusions that invade the province of the jury. The state responds that it intends to elicit expert testimony establishing the vehicles are the same, and such testimony will be neither speculative nor otherwise improper. Hippler, in this order, basically tells Ashley Jennings, Bill Jennings, and I said that on purpose, and the rest of the prosecutors how to go about making sure that this can get in the way that you want it to get in on. Hippler says you want to have the person testifying first as the expert. Once the expert disclosure is made that he is identifying all of these vehicles as the same vehicle, then it would not be speculative. It'd be going off of the evidence that was presented in this courtroom and that therefore then can be referred to in that manner. Problem is that there's not one single report, okay, except for Hill's report, which is, he's a rebuttal, okay? So he's not in the case in chief. So I want to know who is going to come out here, okay, and speak on this report other than Hill in their case in chief. This is not Immel's report. This is Hill's report, and he was only disclosed as a rebuttal. Okay. But Hippler over here says, obviously we had the oral arguments on April 9th, and now this is the standard of admissibility. And here are the facts that Hippler has said. Keyword facts. Following the homicides, law enforcement gathered video surveillance from various locations surrounding the crime scene, including from 1112 King Road. Surveillance videos from 5 other locations within 0.6 miles of the crime scene also captured what law enforcement believed to be suspect vehicle 1 in the hour preceding the crimes. Based on the direction of travel and timestamps from these videos, investigators mapped what they believed to be suspect vehicle 1's route of travel. Just so we're clear, that did not happen in any report. Hippler is stating something that is not true, did not come from the words of any report. Again, if you go and you listen, or not listen, but if you read the report, it's simply these are the sightings, and then the maps are showing where the location is of the camera to the location of the crime scene, so that it shows how close it is. And look at what he's saying. Exhibit S2, Agent Rob Hill's surveillance review report. Exhibit S3, the maps. Exhibit S4, Agent Immel's report. Okay. I mean, I literally fell out of my fucking chair when I read this. I'm like, wait a second. He's taking those maps as path of travel? Though the car never went to the dumpster. You guys do know that one of the maps shows from the house to the dumpster, right? You guys are aware of that. The car never went there. Just so we're clear. So that's where the footers are there. See? One of the surveillance videos relied upon by law enforcement was from a camera located at 1125 Ridge Road. Video footage captured at 4:01 a.m. From this camera provided a clear view of the white sedan depicted therein, which law enforcement believed shared similar class characteristics to a 2014-2016 Honda Elantra. Again, footer there's 3, and that's your that's from Immel's report. Okay. Now, while there is no continuous footage showing the vehicle identified in the Ridge Road footage traveling to the crime scene, the Ridge Road camera was located 0.3 miles down the road from the crime scene. From this collective evidence, investigators believe the vehicle seen on the Ridge Road footage at 4:01 a.m. was suspect vehicle 1, captured on the 1112 King Road footage at 4:04 a.m. Just so we know this, no report says that. Well, okay, I take that back. They're saying that there was a sighting at 4:01, okay, at Ridge Road. Yep. But it's saying that it's taking footage from all over, that anything that looks like it could be the vehicle in question. So versus it being like, well, could there be 2 vehicles that one was seen at 3:58? How do you know if that's the 4:01 one, right? And that's what's going to be the big pow at trial. Because once you show that Linda Lane 1320 with a dumpster does not have this headlights to pick up the path of travel on Taylor, that's going to be a big problem. And it's supposedly missing from what I've gathered. They don't have it. But yet that camera was consistently recording and then just miraculously clipped, just so we're clear. That's how that went. Now, I believe I touched pretty much on the rest of this. And this is where Hitler basically tells them how to do it. To the extent that the defendant is attempting to prohibit the state from arguing or asserting as facts that the vehicles are the same or the suspect vehicle one, he is correct that it would be speculative and improper without expert testimony to provide a basis to make this connection. And so, however, this proscription does not prevent the state from eliciting such opinions from law enforcement and asserting this as an allegation during the trial based on that testimony. Hill is going to have to testify first. Mark my words. Like, done, period. All right. Next up. According to Hitler, defendant ignores this collection of evidence and focuses instead on solely 2 points of reference. However, the investigators had multiple data points from which they could reasonably infer that the video seen on Ridge Road at 4:01 a.m. was the same that had been seen driving throughout the area in the preceding hour. Cross-examination is going to take care of this when they're going to show at 3:45 Sunset Mart camera that has a similar vehicle. How does that fit into the picture? They're also going to show the timestamps and that a car can't be in the same spot or in two different places at the same time. But that's going to be used for cross-examination / when the defense is going to show their side of things. Okay. But I want to point out right here, the last thing I will point out about this is it is unbelievable that Hitler thinks that King Road and Ridge Road connect. Ready? Right here at the, it is likewise reasonable to infer, notwithstanding the lack of continuous footage, that it continued traveling along Ridge Road until it reached King Road. I fell out of my chair. Hitler believes, okay, that King Road and Ridge Road intersect, like they dead end to each other. He's missing a huge big road, and that road is Taylor. Okay, King Road and Ridge Road are connected by a street named Taylor. The biggest street that there is, the ones that run straight across Taylor. And the Linda Lane dumpster camera footage is deleted, has been lost. Okay. It is missing from 3:30 until 4:06 when it is needed to be able to connect that the 3:58 a.m. sighting over there in King is then the 4:01, and it would be able to be seen as such if you had the Linda Lane camera footage. It was there, and all of a sudden it's missing. But don't mistake this right here, right now, that Judge Hitler in his order thinks that King Road, that here says that it continued traveling along Ridge Road until it reached King Road. That is impossible to do without you getting onto Taylor at some point. Taylor is the street that you have to turn off of to get into the development, as we all know. And based on the path of travel, they're going to have to answer why this is missing footage. Period. Next, we're going to go with this one. Okay. This was the vague expert disclosures. And we're going to start with Darren Gilbertson. You know why we're going to start with Darren Gilbertson? Because I want to shove it straight up answer 42's ass. Here you go. Answer 42. Buckle up, Buttercup. Here you go. They must watch a lot to catch a membership. Darren Gilbertson. Well, we got a footer right off the rip. Darren Gilbertson. What's about Darren Gilbertson, number 15? The state submitted only a rebuttal disclosure for Detective Gilbertson. So that means he's a rebuttal, okay, to what Ann Taylor is going to present. Darren Gilbertson is from the Idaho State Police, and he's a detective. He worked with Officer Payne. It's like his name should be Mike Van Leuven. It's the same thing. You're a detective with the Idaho State Police. Okay, he is not an expert. Continuing on. Defendant disclosure expert opinions from Brett Turvey. Now, this is the first time that we've ever heard this name, Brent Turvey. First time we're hearing this, Brent Turvey. Brent Turvey is a witness for Brian Koberger. First time I've ever heard this. His name. Now, defendant disclosed expert opinions from Brent Turvey that more than one assailant was necessary to accomplish the crime in the time frame alleged. Specifically, he asserts, number one, there is direct and indirect evidence that attempts were made by the suspect/suspects to clean up the crime scene after the homicides, which would have taken far longer than the time interval alleged by the state. A boom. Number two, there were multiple weapons, answer 42. I'll make sure I put this one in pink because I fucking hate pink. There were multiple weapons used against Kaylee Gonsalves. Comma. That's a comma by Hippler. And Xana and Ethan appeared to have been attacked at the same time. Period. Now, let's talk about something. When I read this, I said, oh boy, here we go. Thank you, answer 42. You're welcome. Now, well, when you say that Ethan and Xana were killed at the same time, like, well, yeah, they're in the same room. They were in the same bed. They were sleeping, right? Hitler's leaving out a big, big thing with this, okay? They were killed at the same time. That Ethan and Xana were killed at the same time. You want to know what I believe that means, what the evidence is going to show? That there was no blood transfer between either one of those victims, meaning that Ethan, whether he was killed first or second compared to those two, and Xana, whether she was killed first or second of those two, that there is no blood transferred from, let's say, stabbing Ethan first, and then afterwards taking that same knife and then stabbing Xana, okay, because there would be then Ethan's blood in and on Xana, okay, the blood transfer. If neither one of these two victims have any blood transfer from the other one, that is going to be where and how one would say that these two were killed at the same time, and it couldn't have been by the same weapon or person because there was no blood transfer, but they're in the same room. Now, that's my brain just saying that. I have no idea if that's what the reports say, but I would be willing to bet if I was an expert, the only way that I would possibly be able to determine that enough to say that would be the proximity where these two were found in the same room. Their wounds, here we are. If it was just one weapon, which is this K-bar knife, okay, why isn't there any transfer of blood, okay? If I'm stabbing Xana and then I'm stabbing Ethan, I'm going even back to Xana, because I'm handling them at the same time, okay? Now, something that's interesting is this again is written in Brent Turvey's report. Through his other expert, Rachel Orr, defendant has also submitted evidence that he suffers from, and we heard about that. But we're going to come back to that part. What I want to show, okay. Okay. Now, skipping over his ability or not to be able to commit the crimes due to his condition, Brian Kober, we're skipping over that, okay? Because that's, to me, I want to talk about this. In rebuttal, so what that means is Ann Taylor disclosed one of her experts named Brent Turvey. He's saying that Kaylee Gonzalez, number one, make sure everybody that's just joining us, Kaylee Gonzalez, number one. And now this is watered down Hitler style. I can only imagine truly what his report says, okay? This is watered down Hitler style. There is direct and indirect evidence, that there's a cleanup involved here. There is direct and indirect evidence of that. So therefore it would have taken way longer of time that they're alleging. Number two, there were multiple weapons used against Kaylee. Now, I'm going to bring us back to this whole scenario. Do you remember when Dylan said that she thought that she heard Kaylee coming down and running down the stairs, and then she went back up the stairs? Okay. Steve Gonsalves did a interview last night with Drunk Turkey. I have not got to see it yet. I will be seeing it, and I'm going to watch bits and pieces of it with you guys. But going back to Dylan, if Kaylee, okay, was to actually encounter, so she's upstairs, and she's first able to, let's say, run down the stairs, then she encounters an attacker, okay? And so that's why I'm interested to see where this blood is, where Kaylee's blood is. If there's any blood of Kaylee's that's outside of the bedroom of Maddie's, because to me, if there is, then what Dylan is saying about Kaylee going down and going back up, because I wanted to know if Kaylee was attempting to try to help Maddie and trying to get other people to help Maddie. But when she ran downstairs, if she ran into another assailant, somehow So I'm curious if there's any blood. We don't know that. I don't know that. But I'm saying for there to be like two different weapons, did she meet the two different people? And that's when she like tried to run, and then, she runs back up, and then she's dealing with somebody in the bedroom over there, in Maddie's room. But we'll see based on if there's any blood, if that happened. Back when WSU Kim had come out, I know that I had conversations with her, and she told me that Kaylee was punched in the face repeatedly. I never ever, I don't think, revealed that. I didn't want to say that. Okay. Well, here last night, I guess it came out that Mr. Gonsalves said that Kaylee was punched in the face. And WSU Kim's mom, like, she told me that shit back so long ago. So long ago. And so to hear that, if that is true, I mean, I don't know. To hear that was even being said last night was interesting, because immediately made me think of WSU Kim. And she had said that Kaylee was repeatedly hit in the face. So remember when Mr. Gonsalves talked about that the points of damage do not match? Okay. Yeah. So anyways, wanted to point that back out, that there were multiple weapons used against Kaylee. And then Ann talking about the time and Dylan's statements, and I mean, I just want to see when Kaylee last used her phone. I just really want to see that. I'm curious when Kaylee last used her phone. So, so here's your rebuttal witness to an expert, who is an Idaho State Police personnel, is going to rebut Ann Taylor's expert, who is going to say what I just talked about there. So in this rebuttal, the state disclosed Detective Darren Gilbertson, a lead investigator for Idaho State Police in this case. The disclosure indicates he will testify that he and other investigators conducted timed runs at 1122 King Road. 1122 King Road, they were doing time runs to gain an understanding of the approximate time needed to have carried out the homicides. A report of the timed runs is attached to his disclosure. It was performed to determine if one person could carry out the homicides. Anta was trying to get his opinions and so-called expert rebuttal thrown out because he doesn't have any, there's no reporting, there's no photographs, there's just nothing of this so-called experiment, okay? His opinion will be that depending on the suspect's pace and route, he could have carried out the crimes in approximately 2 to 4 minutes. 2 to 4 minutes is what Detective Darren Gilbertson is going to testify to. Okay. Defendant argues that Detective Gilbertson's testimony should be excluded because, one, the state has failed to disclose how Detective Gilbertson is an expert in timed runs, right? Makes sense. The relevance is minimal. 3, the important data, i.e. recordings, photographs, and notes of the experiment, was not disclosed. And 4, his opinion carries a risk of juror confusion and prejudice. On the prejudice issue, defendant claims that Detective Gilbertson was already familiar with the house when he did the experiment, and additionally, the house had been vacated. Detective also notes that the house has been torn down, so he is not able to conduct his own tests. Again, this is Hippler speaking. Whether Detective Gilbertson's opinions are relevant will depend on what Mr. Turvey and Dr. Orr opine at trial. While Dr. Turvey does not specifically state in his report that one assailant could not have accomplished the murders in this short time frame, alleged by the state, he infers as much through his opinions that there was evidence of cleanup efforts at the crime scene, which would have taken a significant longer period of time. Further, while Dr. Orr's report does not opine as to what deficits in fine motor, remember, I don't want to talk about that part of it. All of this, depending on how they testify, it's going to be on, it may render, Detective Gilbertson's opinion relevant to rebut any inferences that the defendant could not have single-handedly committed the crimes in less than 15 minutes. Further, given Detective Gilbertson's role as the lead detective for Idaho State Police in the investigation, he is well qualified to offer his opinion on suspected movement throughout a crime scene. I mean, this to me is wild. Okay, the person that should be testifying to, he would have to be very familiar with all the lab reports and where the blood was collected and the spatter and blood dropping. I mean, he needs to know every piece of evidence in that home and where it was and what it, like, all those photographs and stuff. It's interesting that Hitler does not have a problem that only 2 of the rooms where the victims were like scanned and not the whole entire house. So let's go right here. So he is well qualified to offer his opinion on suspected movement throughout a crime scene. In addition, there does not appear to be a disclosure violation due to the lack of underlying data. It was a simple experiment consisting of timing Detective Gilbertson moving through the house at a slower speed and at a faster speed. What? His routes were described as well as pauses to simulate the number of stab wounds each autopsy showed. But it doesn't say if any of these people were in any type of a struggle, if any of these people were in different areas of the house and then ran to different areas, if they were somewhere else and then they ran, this is just like, this is pure speculation. Unless you were totally showing like, for example, if my room was just a wreck right now and clothes were all over and clothes are all over like right now, if you go into my son's room, he loves to take all of his drawers out and not put them in. And I'm like, what are you doing? And so when I go into his room, I see all these drawers are pulled open and I'm like, no kid in sight. I'm like, okay. So it would always look like if anybody ever came into my house that somebody was ransacking his room and he was the subject of a robbery. Okay. So is Harsh in here? What's up, buddy? What's up? So just to allow, this detective, he's just gonna get crossed up like a mofo. These Idaho State police officers are gonna get crossed up like mofos. That's just what's gonna happen. I mean, they think it's okay in Idaho for detectives to testify to ME's reports. They did it a couple months ago. So, but this is just, the state just says, hey, there was no structural changes to the house when Detective Gilbertson performed his experiments. The fact that it was vacated or that Detective Gilbertson was familiar with the home, which would presumably allow him to conduct a faster timed run, is fodder for cross-examination, not exclusion. So it's like, like I said, it's going to get destroyed on cross-examination, but should the jury even be able to have it be in their minds, But maybe it's good that it gets in their minds for a little bit and then it just totally is squashed. You know what I'm saying? But at the end of the day, it's going to be really important for the defense to show that Brian's phone is not showing any collusion with other people. Because like Hippler said, just because if this was done by multiple people, how does that make Brian not one of them? So the defense has to be ready to really kind of push that onto the jury that Brian doesn't know anybody there. Brian doesn't, his phone is not showing that he's talking to anybody. And, that kind of like, who would he have done this with? Who was he going to the house with to commit this with multiple people? Brian just had moved there, things like that. And that the phone doesn't show that. But because we have to wait till we see the evidence. But if it strongly suggests that it's multiple people, it doesn't take Brian out of the equation. Okay. But if the defense can show things that, here we have his phone, here we have his computer, and you couldn't find any of this stuff. Like, who did he do this with? Type of thing. So that's going to be like another angle of it. And if you've watched the Monica Simontelli case, go take a look at what Syray did in that case with people's phones in that case and showing when they were together and when they weren't and where they were in certain areas. And that's what I'm expecting to see in this case, people's patterns leading up and until the murders of who they were with, where they were, and was there a chance for Brian to be colluding with anybody else? So, but there's your big bombshell with the multiple weapons. Okay. Multiple people. And then I want to turn our attention to how Hippler feels about these reports. DNA is going to be a big part of this. Now, as we know, and no one's talked about that in a long time, I should say ever, okay? There's blood at the scene, blood on the gloves, blood on the railing, okay? After I read this, I kind of was like, oh God, here, it's coming. I think only testing 113 items is a very, very low number. This woman here, Ayers, is going to testify to why they did and didn't take things to test. Because this is something that I had a question of back when this first happened. Like, wow, they only, like, when they were talking about they had 103 things at the lab, then they had 113. I'm like, that seems like not a lot. Well, guess what they didn't take as well? They didn't take the mattresses. In the Sheldon Jeter Jr. case, they did the same thing. They claimed that Sheldon Jeter Jr. slept in his bed with the murder weapon in between his mattress and bed spring, okay? And if this was the murder weapon that shot off, I don't know, somewhere like 8 times, if the residue from the gun, when you stuck it underneath the mattress, there would be residue on both parts of those mattresses. And so I was always pissed that they never tested these mattresses of Sheldon's, like to see if and in fact this gun, if it's going to test positive for being just fired and someone sticks it like right afterwards, we're talking like 10 minutes after using it. If you're going to stick it in between a mattress, and we did test these mattresses to see if there is that transfer. They never tested the mattresses. In fact, we still have the mattresses. But it's just wild type shit. So let's go to Janine here. Ann Taylor was like, listen, we only want these people testifying to the reports that they did. Okay, if we're not having people testify to things, other people's reports. So here, Janine, she's a forensic scientist with the Idaho State Police Lab, and she works in evidence collecting and crime scene processing. She is disclosed to testify in the state's case in chief about crime scene processing, generally including collecting DNA, blood stains, latent fingerprints, hair and fibers, and shoe impressions. She will explain what DNA is, that it may be present in biological material or left on an item when handled, and that it is collected for preservation and sent elsewhere for testing. She is also going to testify to her work in this case, detailed in Lab Report 25 and supporting field notes. The report discusses Idaho State Police's processing of defendant's Pullman apartment and Washington State University's office, which included photographing and collecting evidence. Ms. Ayers was specifically involved in capturing images of the apartment and office and performing presumptive testing for the presence of blood at various points in the apartment. Her rebuttal testimony concerns Idaho State Police's crime scene investigative procedures generally and the Idaho State Police forensic team's processing of the crime scene at 1122 King Road, including identifying areas that contained probative evidence. We're going to be talking probative, like it's valuable, like the areas of the house that would have probative evidence, valuable evidence, relevant, probative. What do we got? Okay. Well, let's see. This is from Lab Report 11. Also, there would be field notes involved for the team's work and referenced by Bates within the disclosure. Defendant argues that Ms. Ayers' case-in-chief disclosures do not provide any opinions she has about the crime scene processing or about the DNA at issue in this case. Thus, the defendant asked the court to exclude or limit her testimony to her qualifying background and her work in Lab Report 25, because it's her lab report. As to her rebuttal disclosure, defendant argues again that it fails to provide any opinion about crime scene investigation procedures, and it does not clearly state what she did in processing 1122 King Road and what her opinion is regarding what work. So here, I'm over here already thinking that, okay, if this is going to be your rebuttal person for something that Ann Taylor has, as well as she's your expert in your case in chief because she did Lab Report 25 and whatever's on that, she's also going to be a rebuttal to something that Ann Taylor's going to have. Ann Taylor has one of the best crime scene reenactment specialists for stage scenes. That's coming. This, the defense is going to say that this crime scene was staged. Okay. That's what's coming. And I think something big that's coming that a lot of people have been speculating for a long time about is, when you think of a staged crime scene, you think of things being moved, right? You think of people possibly could have been moved. Items could be moved. We heard, what's his name? We heard Megyn Kelly had on Howard Bloom, and Howard Bloom brought one of the most ridiculous things that I think I've heard in this case, which is that Brian Kober brought vials of blood to the scene and placed them in that house within this ridiculously small time frame, and that one of his crazy hypotheses is that Brian Kober planted blood. I again fell out of my chair, could not believe that what I was listening to, and I'm like, holy ball sack. Okay. Like, wow. Like, and they call us conspiracy theorists over here. Literally, he had 2 different vials of blood that belonged to 2 different people, and he planted this at the crime scene. Again, cheers. Crazy. Now, I say though, let's say that that's true. I don't give a shit if it's true, if it's not true. That blood should have been a sought piece of evidence, right? Why wouldn't it be? Other thing is before you got the name Brian Kober, wouldn't you think to yourself that if you're working with the ME, and there could possibly have been a chance that there was multiple weapons, that you're dealing with possibly multiple perpetrators, tell me that would not even just as an investigator be on your radar. Okay. So why would you even just stop, even if you got the name Brian Kober? Or even before that, were they investigating this as multiple people? I'm curious to find that out. I'm curious to know, like kind of like in the Delphi case, were there people adamant that this was done by more than one person? We're going to find out if people thought that. You'd be lying to yourself and to others, okay, if you were an investigator on this case, in my opinion, and you didn't consider that there could be multiple perpetrators. I think to consider it would be normal. I think that if you didn't consider it, you'd be blinded. Okay. With that said, defendants' challenges misapprehend the type of expert Miss Ayers is. Much like law enforcement, Miss Ayers is a hybrid fact expert witness as opposed to a traditional expert. Okay. So once again, here we have this time that the state was overly cautious, and they were like, listen, in the abundance of being overly cautious, we don't know if this person would be considered an expert. If not, so we're disclosing them as an expert. Okay. So basically, this person is not an expert and will not be testifying as an expert because they're a hybrid. I'm going to just go take my 5-iron out. No, I'm going to take my hybrid out, and I'm going to go hit the green here. They are a hybrid investigator here in this case. We've heard it all. Now we have Hippler saying that we have hybrid investigators. This here she is. Bring her down. Miss Ayers. Karen, thank you so much. You are so spot on, my firecracker. I love you, Karen. $999.99. Shake it, baby. Shake it. We got a lot of new people here. Congratulations, Caroline. You are now a member at Truth and Transparency. Noelle's just been loving it today. We appreciate her. I appreciate her so much. She's bought a ton of memberships today. She's donated to the channel a lot today. Thank you so much, Noelle. I'm speechless. Thank you so much. I am. Sue, love and happiness, 21 months. Love and happiness to you, Sue. Too much to handle, member for 7 months. How was Kaylee supposed to go to court? She's dead. Steve told Daniel that she wouldn't have to go to court because they had so much evidence. What? I have no idea. I have not watched it yet, but I think Steve's a lot like me in a way that like our brains are working so fast, and when we're saying something, so I try to break down what Steve says and truly what I think he means. There has to be some type of, he's meaning something else. Maybe he means Olivia, when he said Kaylee. But I'm guessing it's something like that. Whoa, Jen, thanks for all of your hard work. Lana, thank you. Noelle, look at you. Fun fact, Lana hates pink. I like the artist pink. If I just prefer, I'd rather pick my yellows and my blues. I like red and black. So fun fact. Fun fact, keyboard crime fighter. Fun fact, I was named after one of Lana's fact-finding live videos. Yeah, you were. There you go. Thank you so much. Karen, $999 again, 99 cents. Please stay on this case. BK needs you. I'm not here for Brian Kober. I'm here for the truth. I'm here for our rights. Whoever benefits from it, benefits from it. That's how I feel. So when people say I'm one side or the other, well, I'm definitely pro my motherfucking rights. So if that makes me one side or the other, then that's what it does. But we don't even know that answer. We don't, they don't, nobody knows it. And then Colleen, oh, thank you, Lana. You're the best. I appreciate that. That's really kind. Going back over here to our girl, Janine, we got some more bombs I want to go over first. So here we are. So we got this hybrid investigator. Defendant challenges. Obviously, they said it's misapprehended. So here we go. She will be educating the jury on crime scene investigative procedures to provide foundation for her testimony regarding the work she and her team performed in this case, as outlined in Lab Reports 25 and 11, and the accompanying field notes. This testimony is factual in nature, despite the fact that it requires special knowledge, skill, experience, and training. Consequently, the absence of opinion in her disclosures does not limit her ability to testify to these matters. So basically what Ann Taylor wants to know is when you are disclosed as an expert, you're allowed to opine your opinion as an expert. Like, that's the big difference, man. When they always say based off of your training and experience, and then they let them answer a question. Okay. That's different than being able to speculate. Like there's that line. So I personally believe that this is not, he laid it out. She's not an expert. Okay. Her training and experience allows, she's being matter of fact with how they do things in the lab and in the field. So now let's talk about Nick Balance. So much is riding on Nick Balance. Like you guys wouldn't believe. All the probable cause in this case is riding on Nick Balance. So let's talk about him. According to Hippler, FBI Special Agent Balance was primarily involved in the analysis of cell phone records in the investigation. He is disclosed to testify in the state's case in chief about his analysis of AT&T cell phone records for the defendant, Maddie and Xana, as well as his own drive testing measurements to determine the use and general location of their cell phones between June of 2022 and November 2022. So right there, for the first time, we hear Balance is going to be talking about, because he's AT&T. Maddie was AT&T. Xana was AT&T. Brian Kohlberger was AT&T. He is mapped out from June of 2022 to November of 2022 where the defendant was and where Maddie and Kaylee were. I'm sorry, Maddie and Xana were, not Kaylee. She's T-Mobile. So now that's what Cyre does. That's what Cyre does. And why I think it's going to be interesting and better is Cyre is going to take all of them, if and in fact that's what he was tasked to do. I recommend going and watching the Monica Cimatelli case, because how I envision Cyre testifying is how he testified in the Monica Cimatelli case. That's what I would be using him for, to show all the victims, all the third-party culprits, and their client. And it's going to show on a little map where everybody's moving. It's going to be like this. And the map is going to go based on the days. And so it's going to show, who they're crossing paths with, who they're with. And it's going to highlight really important days. That's what I see. Obviously, if that doesn't happen, they could potentially use that through Josiah Roloff as well. So, now going back over here. So accompanying his initial disclosure, this is his initial disclosure. We're going to break this down. So his initial disclosure, in his initial disclosure is his 30-page CAST report, which discusses and maps the data he reviewed and the methodology employed. Now, according to Cyre, it's really outside the norm. Okay. And again, this is in his initial disclosure, which is Exhibit 2 or S-2A. His supplemental disclosure goes through each page of CAST report to discuss its significance. He, meaning Nick Balance, he will also discuss topics pertaining to how cellular technology works, particularly how cell towers operate and how cell phones connect to the towers, how cell phone usage for the data is reflected in call detail records. Those are your CDRs. That's what we get. When we see who we're calling, that's our call logs, call detail records, who we're calling and who we're texting, who's texting us, who's calling us, okay? AT&T, guys, it can do far more than just your call logs and your text messaging, okay? That's going to be the big bombs for me, is that the ability with, if you have AT&T, what you can learn and know about somebody that has AT&T, and depending on how they have their phone set up. I learned this by literally watching all of Si's episodes, breaking down Si's episodes by myself to educate myself on that. Nelos is a big part of AT&T, and that's what was referred to before they started calling it timing advanced records. That's going to be important. Now, back to this. For example, really quick though, with the with Ayers, for example, the disclosure discusses why the team focused on certain areas of the home as opposed to others, why they decided not to collect mattresses and bed frames, and why they swabbed and or applied amino black where they did. So that was just, she's going to talk about why they did the kind of what I said earlier. But Ann Taylor's going to have a lot more questions about, they were just using the mattress, and then, wait till you hear other things. The areas. So remember, all the probable cause in this case is literally built off of Nick Balance, going back to Nick Balance. Okay. Hold on, my ear. Okay. This little footer here basically just breaks down the different dates that Nick Balance turned in certain things and how his where his opinions lie in terms of his disclosures. So the state submitted 3 disclosures for Nick Balance. The initial disclosure, but that I'm telling you, the initial one was a cast draft. I don't care what anybody says. That's your initial one, and that was in 2023. Then they want to talk about, because now it's for the expert portion of it. So the expert portion of it began here. And where Ann Taylor's team has an issue is right here. That draft to then this. It's different. It's different. The rebuttal disclosures on February 17th and the amended supplemental disclosure on March 3rd. In addition, throughout this case, defendant has had and been on notice of the Exhibit A's, which is the probable cause affidavits, to the various search warrant affidavits, which detail much of the opinion and analysis of the CAS team. Now, right there, Hippler puts, it's awesome that he said that, okay? Hippler is letting the defense team know, I know that the cast was heavily used in obtaining probable cause. That's what that's about right there. Boom. I know that. Now show that it's a lie. Now the defense needs to show that it's a lie. And they are going to show that. And thus balance, including those related to defendant's locations as the outlined times before and after the homicides. So Hippler's basically saying balance is on the hook for those. Balance is on the hook for the probable cause affidavit. Okay. Now, moving on to how those records provided by AT&T for the targeted cell phone plans. In this case, were used to create the cell maps. Okay, here we go. So right here's where I'll pick up. So it's going to show their general locations before and after the homicides and their direction of travel. In challenging Agent Balance's case-in-chief disclosures, defendant provides the affidavit of his cell phone data expert, Cy Ray. Now we're going to see how biased Hippler is towards Cyree. So go ahead and take your twisted tea and just start chugging it. Okay. All right. So Mr. Ray complains. First off, right off the bat, pink. We're going to use pink. Mr. Ray complains. Look at that. Can you believe that? Mr. Ray complains versus just saying, Mr. Ray's affidavit says this. Look at this. Mr. Ray complains that he is unable to identify Agent Balance's methodology, which was described in the cast report. He's saying, Hippler's like, it was described in the cast report. Not sure what your problem is, buddy. Okay. Hippler's acting like he knows because he's an expert too. Okay. Mr. Ray states that the cast report omits data and or fails to mention how certain AT&T data was utilized in his analysis, namely handoff data and drive test mapping, and why some data was ignored. Footer 5 down here. Mr. Ray notes that Agent Balance failed to include analysis of handoff data for defendant's cell phone between the hours of 2:30 and 3 a.m. on November 13th, 2022. That he did not include the mapping he relied upon to establish defendant was near the crime scene on several occasions before the crime, and he failed to disclose how his drive test works to a sufficient degree. Okay. This is what Cyree is saying. And we saw, not only was it his affidavit, but yeah, it was in response to Nick Balance's disclosures. He just didn't like whip this out of nowhere. He's like, based on what Nick Balance provided, you're off of the meadows here, man. You're astray from the normal ways that, first of all, AT&T does things. Everything based upon what Cyree is saying is that this is not the norm for how they normally do it. Okay. He asserts, meaning Cyree asserts, this omitted data and methodology is exculpatory, and without it, he cannot fairly analyze Agent Balance's work. No, I personally believe what he means is that based off of what he's done, the state has a huge problem, and I am not going to guess at what he means because that's not my role. Okay. The state has a huge problem on their hands based on what Nick Balance has done, said, and disclosed because, wow, I know Nick Balance's work, and this is not how Nick Balance normally works. You guys got to go back and listen to what Cyree has said in the past about he knows who Nick Balance is, and he knows that this guy knows how to do things. Sorry, guys. I'm just trying to clear my throat as much as I can. According to the state, its disclosures sufficiently identify Agent Balance's opinions and the facts and data he relied upon, and defendant's concerns are fodder for cross-examination. But if you remember, the cross-examination that Cyree wants to do or have and do pertains a lot to the timing advance data, which in a different disclosure was said to, hey, you're on a tight lease with the voir dire, and once Nick Balance denies it, it's shut down. Okay. So here we go. According to the state, its disclosures sufficiently identify Agent Balance's opinions and the facts and data he relied upon, and defendant's concerns are fodder for cross-examination. In fact, look at Judge. In fact, in Agent Balance's rebuttal disclosures, first of all, we're talking about his actual disclosures, okay? Ann Taylor's, we're talking about his disclosures. It is the burden is on the fucking state. Okay? This is what Ann Taylor was saying. You don't get to see and hear everything that my experts say and then think that you're going to then, well, based off of whatever they say, this is what I'll rebut it and this is how I'll do it. It's like, what? That's not how this works. That's not how this works at all. So here, Hippler thinks, guess what, guys? It doesn't matter. It's okay because we have rebuttal disclosures that, in fact, here it is. In fact, in Agent Balance's rebuttal disclosure, the state marches through. Look at the different language. Marches through. Look at the language. Mr. Ray complains. Marches through. If I am Brian Kohlberger, I am demanding that my lawyers put in a motion and that you're going to have to state this record so openly and so clear. But we don't have to prove that a judge is biased. We have to prove that they appear to be biased. Okay? And this is the appearance of bias to me. I have no idea if Brian Kohlberger is innocent or I don't know. But reading Hippler's words every single time, the appearance of bias, it's so obvious. It's so obvious, just like it is with Bev. It's so glaring obvious. And you shouldn't have that. No defendant should have that. Because I don't want to see Kaylee's family do this again. Dude, we're watching Karen Reed's family go through it again. I don't want that for them. I don't want that for any of the victims and their families. You have to, his lawyers are going to have to say something about this. And they're going to have to say it soon for the record purposes. Like, I just don't think that this is, it appears to be biased. The language, it appears to be biased. Okay. So here, in fact, in rebuttal, who gives a fuck about rebuttal? That's what we're talking about. Agent Balance's rebuttal, the state marches through each concern outlined by Mr. Ray, offering additional explanation about what Agent Balance considered, including the handoff data and why. Well, why wasn't this done before? If it was just so what's the problem? Why would it take an affidavit by Cy Ray for any of this to even occur? Again, I still have all my money on Boyd Jackson giving all the information to Nick Balance and Nick Balance using all the timing advanced. So it's just a matter of who buried him. So defendant, however, asserts the attempted clarification in the rebuttal disclosure is insufficient, arguing there is no disclosure as to why he omitted 95% of the relevant coverage maps for his drive testing. No analysis or mapping of the handoff data, no documentation provided of the CAS reports peer review process. Now I'm going to tell you why that's really important. The mapping. Give us the mapping. You want to know why they want the mapping? Well, what mapping did you use? Did you use stuff from 2022? Right? Where'd you get this mapping? Where'd you get this data? We want your information so we can show how you lied in your probable cause affidavit. Why do you think that they're not providing this? That's how it looks to me. Okay? That we have to hide our source, because if we reveal our source and where everything stems from, then it'll prove that we lied in the probable cause affidavit. That's how I see it. Again, I could be wrong, but how it looks and it's being portrayed, again, my brain, that's how I see it. Now, the peer review. There is no requirement under Rule 16 that the state provide peer review documentation of an expert's report. Likewise, the rule does not require an expert to identify the data they did not rely upon or why they did not rely upon that data. Now look at what a smartass he is here. This is straight smartassville right here. Unbelievable, in my opinion. And this is a judge that's like twisting the words. However, the fact remains that the defendant has all the facts and data that Agent Balance relied upon to form his opinions. Is that a fact? What a sentence is that right there? Ready? However, the fact remains that defendant has all the facts and data that Agent Balance relied upon to form his opinions. How in the world can you say that when we have not had a voir dire yet, okay, to see what Agent Balance is going to say about having the timing advance reports or not? Think about that. Wait, what? Cy-Ray is basically saying in an affidavit that there is digital forensic evidence that Boyd Jackson gave Nick Balance papers, gave him material, and you can forensically see it based on the fact of Cy-Ray getting that stuff during the discovery time exchanging, and it was a mistake. I don't believe that Cy-Ray was ever supposed to get that shit. Okay. Me personally, I believe that Nick Balance is not going to lie. And this is why. Nick Balance knows that Cy-Ray has the nuts. Okay. So are you going to risk your job? I don't believe that Nick Balance is going to lie for Ashley Jennings. If Ashley Jennings and Payne and them, they decided to not put in everything, that's on them. Because I personally believe that Nick Balance is not going to lie and that this is why there's a problem. He's not going to lie because Nick Balance knows that Cy-Ray has the nuggets. And also, it was never Nick Balance that lied. Nick Balance never lied. He hasn't lied yet. It wasn't Nick Balance that wrote up the affidavit. It wasn't Nick Balance that testified under oath. So just be prepared for that. Right here, number 7, he finally mentions it here in a little footer. Where does he say right here, though? Yep, see, told you. However, the fact remains the defendant has all the facts and data that Agent Balance relied upon to form his opinions, which are expressed within his cast report number 7. And then this is where this footer comes. And this is how I know that I am right. You go down here to 7, and what does it say? None other than a draft of the cast report was disclosed to the defendant in the early stages of this case. Boom. Tying him. That's the affidavit shit. That was what was used in the affidavit. And guess what? It's lies. It's lies. And now here it's in as a fact. However, the fact remains that the defendant has all the facts and data that Agent Balance relied upon to form his opinions. And according to Hippler, that would be no timing advance records. And that's going to be a lie, as it was buried. So I'm trying to break this all down as best as I can. Hopefully you guys are following along. I know it gets confusing, but it was subsequently peer reviewed. And this is what then Cyree said that this is outside the norm of how that they did this portion of it. But that's not how the peer review works, shit like that. So how I foresee this happening, okay, is if Nick Balance testifies that he received timing advance records from Boyd Jackson in December of 2022 for the defendant for November of 2022, okay? And he is going to then say, I either A, didn't provide them to Ashley Jennings, B, I provided them to Ashley Jennings, okay? Or C, I provided them to Detective Mowry, Detective Payne, okay? And I did my drive test appropriately, and I never saw when I turned in to AT&T from my connection how I get things, what I gave them, I never even looked at the probable cause affidavit. Balance did not use the TA records, is what Heather says. Well, I believe that the evidence shows that they were used because that's where they got the maps from. You cannot use, like, that's where the maps were from. And then what they did to write up his arrest warrant, they just didn't. They took out what they knew. They knew this at the time. So it's a matter of if you knew that this was false when this was submitted. But the question that's going to come in is, well, I'm sure you went to Detective Balance, right? When you found out about all of this, Ashley Jennings, did you go to Detective Balance and say, hey, did you use any timing advance records? Do you have any timing advance records? And so is it going to come up that emails are going to be able to be sought for and after, and text messages and phone calls? I mean, how is this all going to play out? But basically, we already know that there was an issue with the 7 minutes. So he clearly used, he had those, but he decided to say that it stopped. It stopped, and they acted like the phone stopped reporting at 2:47. Meanwhile, the phone didn't stop reporting until 2:54. And so the question is did you know that the phone was still reporting? Did you let the people in Moscow know? You're working in the same area. You're with them. How could they write up an affidavit? Like, you're supplying them with this, with the language. And what's the language? Why would you say that the phone stopped reporting at 2:47 if it didn't stop reporting until 2:54? I think that there is evidence to show otherwise, though. Detective Mowry. Balance didn't use timing advance records to make his report, but he did know they existed. That's how you get around the lie. I think that it's unable to get around that way because he, because of the maps. So we'll see. We'll see. If Balance lied, the FBI won't let him come testify. That's what DV says. I just don't think he needs to lie, because I don't think that Nick Balance was the one that was crafting up the way that all of this shit was written. Nick Balance isn't the one that wrote up the probable cause affidavit to arrest Brian Kohlberger. Okay. So now, basically Hippler says in the end, while his methodology might not be set forth, so look at this. While his methodology might not be set forth with as much specificity as Mr. Ray would like, Rule 16 does not require that detailed methodology be provided. What? Do you guys know what the word methodology means? It's like, hey, Lana, Lana, you made this Excel spreadsheet and you have these timestamps of all of these cars. What'd you do? And then you explain what you did. Well, I pressed play on the VCR. I sat there and I watched, and each time I saw the car enter the frame, I paused it, took a screen clip of it, recorded the timestamp that it was coming east or west, noted it down. Then I continued to press play, stop, pause. Like that's your methodology. Like that's my method to how I created this Excel spreadsheet, right? How Hitler's answer is, this is absolutely fucking like, wow. Well, Rule 16 does not require that detailed methodology be provided. It requires merely opinions, facts, and data for those opinions and the witness's qualifications. Well, then I think that Rule 16 needs to change if that's true. Because you don't have to disclose your methodology on how you got to something. No, guess what we do in Idaho? We just let you're just going to do that for cross-examination. So we get to let people testify in a state's case, okay, to a bunch of bullshit. Then during cross-examination, we have to destroy it. Exactly. This is how Idaho operates. They don't have the Daubert test. Now, Heather and Jared Barnhart. I'm interested in this. For Brian Kober's movements. The Barnharts are digital specialists with Cellbrite who were retained by law enforcement to analyze the defendant's cell phone and PC to determine user behavior and actions. They are disclosed to opine that the gaps in data on the two devices were abnormal. 10 footer. Well, let's just back up. Let me announce what a couple of these footers are good for. As far as Nick Balance, the example defendant complained at the hearing that Agent Balance analyzed handoff data for the 7 minutes prior to the phone powering off at 2:54 a.m. on November 13th, but did not provide an opinion about what his analysis showed. Like, what was the phone doing? Where was it at? That type of an opinion. It just says that now my new thing is that, yeah, the phone stopped working or providing information at 2:54 versus in the affidavit, remember, it was 2:47. So this is a change. And how Hitler is not mentioning and how he's just like okay with this is just bizarre. But thus the defendant wants to exclude any opinion as to what his analysis of those 7 minutes showed. However, as pointed out in Agent Balance's rebuttal disclosure on page 13 of the CAS report, set forth the data Agent Balance relied upon to opine the defendant's phone used a certain tower and sector at 2:47 a.m. southeast of his apartment and ceased communication with the network at 2:54. Okay, well, I thought it was southwest. Remember? Southeast of his apartment. That's where the defense is saying that's new. He also explains that the location of the device is best estimated by the initial cell site versus the handoff cell site. Now that's going to get ate the fuck up in court. Like, that's really his opinion, that the initial cell site versus the handoff would be a better. That's his opinion. Are you kidding me? Are you absolutely kidding me? Think about that. So let's say that I'm on a call at my house right now, right? And so therefore I'm on a cell tower, right? Right here. I get into the car and I start traveling. I'm not still on that cell tower. I'm going to be handing off to other ones. And so sit here and tell me how you would believe that what do you think would be more accurate? Handing it off and where it was at 254 or where it was at 247? I mean, this is absurd. Nick Balance, he will be allowed to testify to these opinions. If defendant believes Agent Balance strays beyond these opinions, he can object and the court will take the matter up then. Versus just saying, yeah, he's not going to opine anything else. Now, Heather and Jared, the state submitted the following disclosures for the Barnhart's initial disclosures. Heather, December 18th, 2024, initial disclosure for Jared, same date. Rebuttal disclosures, February 17th. Their rebuttal disclosures state simply that the Barnharts intend to rebut the expert testimony of Carol Pendon. First time we hear Carol Pendon and Kevin Pendon and Josiah Roloff, but need additional information prior to offering rebuttal opinions. Defendant is not challenging this. Okay. So Heather and Jared are basically going to testify that Brian's phone, that there are gaps with his phone and his personal use computer, and that it looks like, in quotes, that the defendant's activities on his PC and cell phone for a period of time before and after the homicides, why there's gaps in data over that time period, are abnormal. The Barnhart's opinions regarding these topics are fully set forth in their joint report. For example, they observed gaps in defendant's school PC that, quote unquote, may be consistent with cleaning up, quote unquote, cleaning up or using anti-forensic methods to clear evidence. Among the gaps found were in the PC's event logs and system resource use monitoring between November 11th, 2022 and November 16th. And this was interesting to me, these dates, November 11th and November 16th, which the Barnharts opined was abnormal given that school was in session because this is his school computer. Likewise, they located gaps in the PC's Chrome history during dates where downloads occurred on the system, indicating the user was private browsing or clearing browsing history. Together, the Barnhart's disclosures and joint report has set forth all that is required by all. There is no basis to exclude or limit testimony. But the state submitted they're going to have to explain why this is relevant as well. I know that they did not have school because they were observing, what was it, on the Friday. Like they didn't have school for, what was it? Was it President's Day? It was one of the holidays, Veterans Day. So I'm curious if that comes up with these, like in between these two dates. So, Michael Douglas. Michael Douglas is going to testify to Brian Colbert supposedly changing. So Mr. Douglas is a forensic accountant for the FBI and is disclosed to testify to financial transaction data for defendant, the 4 victims, and the 2 other roommates. His initial disclosures identifies by categories and date range the financial transactions data he intends to testify to, and he's basically going to testify that the defendant, okay, his supplemental disclosure identifies more specific that the defendant, there's video evidence obtaining showing defendant's ATM withdrawals, and basically how all that changed, how Brian wasn't using his card anymore. Okay. Defendant contends that Mr. Douglas should not be able to offer any opinions because none are expressed in his disclosures. Specifically, defendant notes that Mr. Douglas's supplemental disclosure indicates he will testify to an analysis of defendant's spending habits. Defendant takes issue with this, arguing there is no spending habits opinion disclosed. However, Mr. Douglas makes clear that he intends as a fact witness and is only being disclosed as an expert in the event the court determines his testimony was based on specialized knowledge. So again, here's your hybrid. Okay. Specifically, for example, the disclosure notes that the defendant only conducted ATM withdrawals on and after the date of his homicide and ceased using his debit card after November 10th, 2022, whereas prior to November 10th, he had regularly used his debit card. There is no indication he will attempt to opine about the reasons for the spending changes, just that they occurred. And now this is where Hippler's like, well, this doesn't even seem relevant. So they're going to have to, without laying some, without more, the court has concerns about the relevancy of this testimony to show that he began November 10th using the ATM and not his debit card. I'm curious if his, whatever. But the defendant has not challenged it on this basis yet. So that's what you can expect to hear as far as the defendant's spending habits. Shane Cox, Mr. Cox is a litigation and regulatory manager for Amazon. His initial disclosure states that Mr. Cox will testify to the content of documents produced by Amazon to law enforcement pertaining to an Amazon account associated with defendant. The documents include the order history between January 5th of 2022 and December 13th of 2022, and click history and sign-in history for specific dates in that time frame. The documents are referenced by the Bates numbers. His supplemental disclosure identifies with specificity the facts Mr. Cox will testify to from the identified documents. As with his challenge to Mr. Douglas, the defendant asserts that Mr. Cox should be or should not be able to offer any opinion because none are expressed in his disclosures. Again, Mr. Cox is a fact witness and will not be offering opinions. So he's just simply going to testify to, here's his Amazon account, here are these purchases, this is the day. He's not going to be asked like, why do you think that there's no other purchases, or things like that, his opinion. Again, Mr. Cox is a fact witness, guys. And his footer down here says that the state submitted 2 disclosures for Mr. Cox. Initial disclosure S5, December 18th. That's just the dates of them. Defendant also asserts in the motion that Mr. Cox's testimony should not be allowed because, according to defense expert David Howell, far more information must be reviewed in order to attribute specific activity to a specific person or otherwise render an opinion about user behavior with forensic certainty. So what I have a feeling that Mr. Cox is going to say is that this account purchased this. I mean, he's just going to read what's on the fucking paper. He's going to read what's on the paper. What other one did I want to hit on? Okay. Gary Dawson. Dr. Gary Dawson was disclosed in rebuttal by the state to testify to the degree of impairment of the victims, particularly Madison Mogen, at the time of the homicide. His expert report attached to his disclosure opines that Madison Mogen would have been, quote unquote, markedly intoxicated from the effects of alcohol around the time of her death. She would not have the ability to mount a meaningful response to a sudden threat to her person, end quote. He further states that while he has limited his review to Madison Mogen, the same general principles apply to the other victims. Defendant seeks to strike his testimony on grounds that it is improper rebuttal. He contends that none of his experts have challenged her ability to fight back or otherwise contested their toxicology levels. The state responds that the opinion rebuts defense expert Brent Turvey's opinion that the more than one assailant was necessary to accomplish the crime in the time frame alleged. Specifically, the state argues that the evidence Ms. Mogen was unable to effectively fight back supports its position that one assailant could have completed the homicides in a short time frame, basically leading me to believe that Madison was the first person Specifically, the state argues that the evidence Ms. Mogen was unable to effectively fight back supports its position that one assailant could not have completed the homicides in a short period of time. Again, this is just Hippler. To the extent that Jade Miller's supplemental disclosures and Catherine Dace White's rebuttal disclosures contain a discussion of CODIS, how it works, how CODIS eligibility is determined, and why the decision was made not to enter certain profiles into the system, defendant objects that its new ultimately opinion. However, the court does not view this discussion as opinion. Rather, it's purely factual issue explaining reasons why certain decisions were made consistent with CODIS rules and limitations. In addition to the extent that the defendant contends these facts were not timely disclosed, the defendant has plenty of time between their disclosure and trial to address them. And this goes with ISP forensic lab scientists, which is going to talk about why they put stuff in CODIS and why they didn't. So the state disclosed several forensic scientists from Idaho State Police Forensic Lab to testify as experts in this case. The initial disclosures for each scientist describes the subject matter the expert will discuss, including the particular evidence and testing performed. The disclosures also reference each scientist's specific lab report by Bates number. In each disclosure, the state included the following caveat. This disclosure is provided as an aid. It does not encompass all findings, impressions, conclusions, or material related to this expert's involvement in this case. It further does not in any way limit the scope of the expert's testimony. Further, this expert may testify about findings, impressions, and or conclusions that he or she drew from the work of other experts who previously examined or handled the evidence in question. After defendant moved to compel more complete disclosures, the court advised the state to supplement accordingly. On March 3rd, 2025, the state did so largely by expounding upon the general subject matter of the experts' respective work. They did not add any new opinions. And see, without seeing this shit, like, it's hard to take Hippler's word at it. We're supposed to just take Hippler's word at it. I want to see the material. I've never gotten to see that material. Defendant now moves to limit the scientist's testimony in the state's case in chief to their lab reports. This limitation is not necessary. If the scientists testify to something that is not disclosed in their disclosures or lab reports, defendant can object at trial. There is no basis to. So basically what he's saying in some of this stuff is like, listen, yeah, they're not going to be able to testify to things that aren't in their report, right? But the whole purpose of these motion liminees was to limit all this sidebarring bullshit that's going to occur, at the trial. So there's going to be a lot of sidebars. Now, okay. The most important part that Lawrence Mowry and these three, Jeffrey Tanzola and Neil Uhrig, will testify to is that there are approximately 50 individual devices, electronic accounts, and digital data listed in the disclosure about which he will testify. And he will opine that he found no connection in that material linking defendant to the devices and data he analyzed. Because Detective Mowry's analyzed devices and information associated with defendant, presumably these are excluded from his opinion. Okay, so what that means is that Mowry worked on the defendant's shit. These other guys, they worked on the devices that did not belong to the defendant. Okay, and these 50 devices that these guys worked on, other than Mowry, none of them had any links to the defendant. And I think that's important because remember what I said in the beginning, which is if there's multiple perpetrators, for the jury to say, okay, well, Brian Kober could still be one of those multiple people. And here it's like Brian Kober is not connected to any of these people that were considered by the state at any time. Jeffrey Tanzola is a special agent with the FBI, and that's who did the extraction and processed and archived the contents of 7 identified digital devices belonging to the defendant. His is disclosed to discuss in the state's case in chief the extracting, imaging, examination, processing, verification, transportation, chain of custody of those devices. The disclosure references and appends his report of examination regarding his work in this regard. Now, Neil, same thing. He's a forensic examiner, and he's a detective sergeant for the Post Falls Police Department who extracted, processed, and archived the contents of computers belonging to the victims and 2 other roommates. His case in chief disclosures likewise state he will discuss extraction, imaging, all that good stuff as to those computers, including the expertise necessary to extract the data from the devices. He will opine that there was no connection found between the listed devices and the defendant. His initial disclosures references, they're offered up already. Defendant argues that each of the 3 experts' testimony must be limited to what has been disclosed. The devices, the data examined, and process used, other than the disclosed opinions by Detective Mowry and Uhrig that had no digital connection was found between defendant and the residents. Defendant argues no specific testimony regarding that the devices and the data depicted should be allowed. To this end, defendant notes that the state has not identified in its disclosures the specific portions of the identified devices and data that these experts will testify to. In response, the state clarifies that it is not seeking to elicit opinions from these witnesses. Rather, it intends to elicit testimony about their qualifications necessary to perform the extractions and analyze of the identified devices and data. It further represents that the defendant has been provided with all of the data analyzed. Do you understand what that means? That means all of these people they're just testifying to the fact that there is nothing more. Like, we didn't do anything shady. Like, all of these are these are the images of all these devices. We're going to testify the chain of custody. We're going to testify to what we did to get the data off of the phones or whatever the device may be, and we provide it then to the defendant. Wow. Now, Rob Hill, I saved him for last because then I'll be back later to discuss the text messages and 911 call, as well as break down some of Mr. Gonsalves's latest interview. But Rob Hill is a special agent with the FBI who reviewed surveillance footage from the hours before and after the homicides occurring during and depicting the law enforcement behaves or believes in the suspect vehicle 1. Agent Hill was disclosed to rebut opinions by defense expert Stephen Becker that it was not possible to ascertain from the surveillance videos whether a front license plate was missing from the vehicle. That's the boom I wanted to end on. So we have a defense expert that is going to say that it was not possible to ascertain from the surveillance videos whether the front license plate was missing from the vehicle. Agent Hill's rebuttal references the full summary of video depicting suspect vehicle 1, which has been disclosed to the defendant, as a basis for his opinion that the suspect vehicle 1 did not have a front plate. And I want to know what video this is from. What is the video? That's the $1 million question right there. What video was supplied that did not have this front plate? Because the defense expert, Stephen Becker, he is going to say that it's not even possible to ascertain one way or the other. He then lists the specific camera locations and timestamps he contends show a clear view of a missing front plate. His rebuttal also states he will provide testimony about the significance of the missing front plate. I want to know now, why don't you think Hippler's mentioning it here? Let's be honest. Why don't you think Hippler's mentioning what video, what timestamp, anything? Why don't you think he's being specific right here? He comes with all these now my last bomb for today is this. Okay, here's a little timeline for you guys. All right. Follow along. Here we go. Lana at work. Okay, those of you guys that are listening, you can listen or you can also choose to watch the screen. All right. According to everything that's been testified to, December 19th, 2022, this is when you get the name Brian Kohlberger. Okay. Now, November 19th, 21st, 23rd, 26th, December 7th, December 20th. Okay. In Immel's report, these are the dates that he has provided stuff. He has provided stuff on the 19th and on the 21st. And X those out, nothing. 23rd, it's the Ridge Road. Okay, so 2011 to 2016, Ridge Road. December 7th, nothing. And then December 20th, okay, it is 2014 to 2016. Now remember though, now you have to consider Hill's report, and he left out all cams from Pullman between, let's just say, 2:30 a.m. to 3 a.m. on 11/13/2022. Okay. Now, I went back and looked at this whole Amazon shit one more time. And before I fell asleep, I saw Cox's. Shane Cox. The documents included the order history between Shane Cox with Amazon. Order history between January 5th, 2022 and December 13th of 2022. The documents included the order history between January 5th, 2022 and December 13th, 2022. That is the same day, December 13th, that Steve Gonsalves and Christy said, oh, what were they twirling his name around December 13th? Remember that? Okay. Remember the other search warrants that I've showed you guys? Why would you, if you're not serving a search warrant on something until, and you don't know what you're going to find, and you don't serve a search warrant until May or April of 2023, why would you stop with Amazon on, December 6th? Okay. Why would you stop? If you would go all the way up until the day that he was arrested to look in a search warrant to see if he purchased this quote unquote, the replacement sheath, what they're trying to say, right? So wanted to point out that I thought that was interesting there. Then going back to this now, if you just find out Brian's name on December 19th, 2022, that means, and on December 23rd, and now on December 23rd, you are actually going to get his phone records, right? Why wasn't Immel, okay, ever shown a video of anything past December 20th? Okay, ready? Why wasn't Immel ever showed anything past December 20th to say, hey, what do you think this? Because if they're tracking based off of a phone where his phone's moving around, then he would go, and if you don't know any of this, truly, I'm proving right here that they had his phone records from Boyd Jackson way before anything to do with GLDC. Okay, I'm proving it right here. If you are Detective Immel from the FBI or a special agent, all right, we have your report, and these are the days that you were provided video. Okay, you don't have Brian Kober, supposedly his phone records and anything to do with them until this date, right? That means you don't know, like then you could track his phone's whereabouts to say, okay, let's see if we can go get cameras in that area so that we can look at that time and see if we can see if there's a sedan. If you're investigators, that's what you would be doing, right? So that you could then provide Special Agent Immel with videos or clips of vehicles in Pullman, right? After or on December 23rd, 24th, 25th, 26th, 27th, 28th. He's arrested on the 29th, right? He looks at no, Immel looks at no car to identify a car with the same make and model as suspect vehicle 1, because they're here. We're going to give this, we're going to give you this. He looks at something on December 20th. And now that's going to be from WSU, but they don't, you know how many cameras there are at WSU? They don't have his phone records to know, like, be able to track where his whereabouts would be to say, hey, let's go get this camera footage from these certain times. You don't know any of that until you get his, allegedly. This is allegedly how they're saying that they got his phone records. This is what proves, in my opinion, that they already had it. Okay. And when they sent Immel a sedan to look at on December 20th to look at, the day after they supposedly identify him. Now, okay, here, send that after, because it's after that day. So go ahead and send it. It looks like it's happening in order, but you don't have the results of his CDRs even. The CDRs to show his whereabouts. So why isn't he sent any photos to look at to see if the vehicles that they said that they had in the probable cause affidavit for the arrest of Brian Kohlberger, remember? They said that they saw, like, this Nevada street, then you got, all that crap in there. This man did not look at one photo, not a video, nothing, after having the phone records of Brian Kohlberger on December 23rd. These are the dates. That is what you call an obvious, glaring, not mistake, but that it's already been done. Otherwise, this motherfucker Immel would have been looking at shit after the 23rd, and they would have been providing him cameras from the WSU area and trying to find that white sedan that they say that they have. Do you know how many cameras there are at WSU? How many businesses there are? They had no idea. They had no idea where Brian Kohlberger may or may not have been until they would have gotten the results back on the 23rd if they truly did it this way. And then therefore they would have had to been providing to Immel. Now, how do I know this? Well, here's Immel's report. And in Immel's report, it shows that these are the days November 19th, November 21st, November 23rd, December 7th, December 20th. Look what I put here. Nothing after December 23rd. Why? Why not? You would send him that because that's when you're first finding out that where Brian's phone was and at what time, right? And so then therefore you're going to say, okay, based on Nick Balance's work, sometime after December 23rd is when we would have found these white sedans, right? At these crazy times to be even looking at 5:35 and 5:25, right? How are they already looking at 5:25 at motherfucking December 10th or December 20th? How would you already be knowing about to look at 5:25 on Bishop? Get the fuck up out of here. You wouldn't. You would not. The FB motherfucking I had Brian Kohlberger's timing advance records way earlier because they knew Brian Kohlberger's name way earlier than December 19th, period. And this fucking report proves it. Because you would get and give this Immel, here's this picture that we found. Here's this video that we found after December 23rd. Not a single one was handed to this man to say, hey, is this clip from, now you go to Hill's report and you say, okay, here we have Stadium Way. We have Stadium Way in Wilson, Stadium Way in Grimes, Stadium Way in Nevada, Stadium Way in Kruger Way. Why do you think that they were looking? And when do you think that they went and got this? When was this supplied? Oh, it was supplied on December 20th. Okay, great. That makes sense because you knew about Brian Kohlberger, right? So you're going to look around the area of what? Sure, if you want to just sit there and just start watching for white sedans, really kind of weird. But how about this, though? Why would you start looking at, when do you think that you would start looking at Port 8820 Port Drive, Clarkson, Washington? When would you start looking at 1300 Johnson Avenue in Pullman? When do you think that you would start looking for those? It's based off of the phone data, and that came after the 23rd. So why wasn't Immel provided anything after the 23rd? Oh, Lana, that's so, I mean, yeah. Duh. Duh. They had no idea that Brian Kohlberger in the morning of the 13th went over to Clarkston, Washington. They had no idea about any of that. Allegedly, they didn't, because we're trying to believe what they're saying here. Oh, but they did. And then ask yourself why Hill's report starts at 3:26 and 10 seconds and not at 2:47, 2:54. Because they, meaning the FBI, was not on board with the probable cause affidavit. The FBI was not on board with the probable cause affidavit. Otherwise, you would have this timestamp just like the probable cause affidavit has, but it does not, because the FBI did not write that bullshit up. Ashley Jennings, Payne, it also tells me that he wasn't provided any video at that time, just like he wasn't provided any of the Linda Lane stuff between 3:30 and 4:06. Immel not receiving any car after 12/20/2022 should tell everybody everything that they need to know. The FBI knew the name Brian Kohlberger before they ever gave it to Moscow Police Department. And it was not the 19th. To think that you would never give Immel a car after December 23rd to identify, that you would have then found on a camera because you got his phone records and you mapped him and you did all the timing advanced. And then, or you're doing the CDRs, you're doing the handoffs, whatever it is that the fuck they're doing. In the probable cause affidavit, they said they had this white car. Okay. You never gave a vehicle to Immel after December 23rd. How is that possible? We'll see you back here tonight. Thank you guys so much. I got to hit up everybody that wrote there at the end. Let's see. Kelly, no, thank you, Lana. You were the best. Thank you so much. Ooh, I'm not going to have a voice. Moto Man, 10 memberships. Thank you so much. Somebody picked up a membership. Mad Maven, welcome. Official gifted a Truth and Transparency membership. Thank you there, Official. Mad Maven 1999 super sticker. Thank you so much. Crime Tourist 10 gifted memberships. Thank you so much. Official, thank you for letting me cry wolf during bingo. Karen, $39.99. We are over 700 likes. Smash that bell, girl. I will. Then Karen did another 20 memberships. Karen, you're the bomb. A lot of people turning green. Is everybody understanding that? That's just crazy for me. I was like, wait a second. We need to point out that no card was given to Immel after December 20th. How is that possible? How do you not want Immel to identify one of the vehicles that you would have found after knowing Brian's path of travel, right? Because of his phone records, right? So what then they're going to say, well, we went off of his ATM card or his debit card purchases. And it's like, well, I thought that he didn't use his debit card. It's going to be really, really interesting. It's going to be interesting. I don't see why all the lies. So it's yeah. If you do an investigation backwards, it makes sense. Absolutely. So hopefully everybody can follow along with that. Again, let me go rest up my voice. I'll be back tonight to do commentary on, I have not watched it. I'll watch it for the first time with you guys. I think that way it's just how I feel and not analyzing it to the point where it's, I don't want to be analyzing someone's words like that. That's not. So Detective Mowry, keep up the great work. You're stellar. Thank you to the mods. Tonight, 9:30. Let's go. Let's go. Again, much love. Thank you. Thank you, Beth.